Imagine this situation for a moment. It's late evening. You're relaxing at home, maybe watching TV, maybe spending time with your family when suddenly you hear a knock on the door. Not a casual knock, a firm, authoritative one. Your mind starts racing. Who could it be? A neighbor, a delivery, or something more serious? You slowly walk toward the door, and as you reach the handle, you notice something unusual. The moment the door opens slightly, an officer's boot wedges between the door and the frame. Suddenly, the situation escalates. One wrong move, one instinctive push to close the door, and you could find yourself in handcuffs, accused of assaulting an officer. Most people have no idea how quickly a simple knock at the door can turn into a legal nightmare. But the truth is, a few simple words and a few smart decisions can protect your rights and keep you out of serious trouble. In the next few minutes, you're going to learn exactly how to handle this situation calmly, legally, and intelligently so you stay protected inside your home. Let's start with the first and most important principle. The biggest mistake people make happens before the conversation even begins. Society has trained us to treat a knock on the door as something that requires an immediate response. The doorbell rings, someone knocks, and our automatic reaction is to walk over and open the door without thinking twice. That instinct can be a huge mistake. Opening the door without knowing who is outside is one of the most avoidable risks you can take. You should never open the door blindly. Before you even think about touching the handle, take a moment to identify who is outside. Many homes today have doorbell cameras or security systems that allow you to see exactly who is standing at your door. If you have one of these systems, use it. Pull up the camera feed and take a look. If you don't have a smart doorbell, check through a peephole or a nearby window. The goal is simple. Understand the situation before you engage with it. This small step gives you valuable information and time to think. There's another important point most people don't realize. From a legal standpoint, you generally have no obligation to open your door simply because someone is knocking, even if that person is a police officer. If you didn't call emergency services and you're not expecting anyone, you are not required to respond. In many situations, choosing not to open the door at all can prevent unnecessary interactions that might otherwise become complicated. Sometimes, the best interaction with law enforcement is no interaction at all. However, there may be times when you do decide to respond. Maybe you want to understand what the officer wants, or maybe you believe the situation requires communication. If you choose to open the door, the way you do it matters more than you might think. Instead of swinging the door wide open it just a few inches. A slight crack is enough to communicate while still maintaining a barrier between you and the outside. If your door has a security chain or latch, use it. That simple piece of hardware creates an additional layer of protection and helps maintain control of the situation. Body language also plays a role in how the interaction unfolds. Keep your hands visible and relaxed at your sides. Avoid sudden movements that could be misinterpreted. Officers are trained to watch for signs of potential danger, and even harmless gestures can sometimes be perceived as threatening in tense situations. Once the door is slightly open, keep your words simple and calm. A straightforward question such as, "Officer, how can I help you?" is more than enough to start the conversation. In many cases, the officer may respond by asking you to step outside so they can talk with you. This is where many people unknowingly give up one of their biggest advantages. Your home provides you with significant legal protections. The moment you step outside onto your porch, your driveway, or your yard, much of that protection disappears. Inside your home, you have greater control over the environment and stronger constitutional safeguards. Outside, the situation can change quickly. If an officer asks you to come outside, a polite but firm response works best. Simply say that you're comfortable speaking right where you are. This communicates cooperation without surrendering your position. Remaining inside your home keeps the interaction on your terms while still allowing you to communicate respectfully. Now let's talk about something that can turn a tense moment into a serious legal problem: using force. Even if you believe an officer is acting improperly, using physical force to push the door shut or push the officer away can have immediate consequences. In some jurisdictions, courts have ruled that officers are not allowed to place their foot or hand inside a doorway during what is known as a knock and talk. However, the legal battle over that issue typically happens long after the incident. In the moment, if you slam the door on an officer's foot or hand, you may be arrested right away. Even if you eventually prove you were legally justified, the short-term consequences could include being detained, spending a night in jail, and dealing with a lengthy legal process. The smarter strategy is to rely on words rather than physical actions. If an officer attempts to block the door with their foot or hand, the best move is to step back slightly and clearly state that you do not consent to entry or any search. After that, you can calmly invoke your right to remain silent. These simple statements establish your legal position without escalating the situation physically. Another situation that sometimes occurs during these encounters is when an officer claims to have a warrant. Hearing that word can instantly raise anxiety levels, but it's important to remain calm and handle the situation carefully. If an officer says they have a warrant, you can ask to see it while keeping the door only slightly open. In some cases, the officer may show it to you through the doorway or slide a copy underneath the door. Laws about whether officers must present the warrant immediately can vary depending on the jurisdiction, but asking to see it is a reasonable request. If officers do enter your home under the authority of a warrant, there's a very important phrase you should say clearly and calmly. State that you do not consent to any search beyond the scope of the warrant. That sentence matters because it protects you from unintentionally granting broader permission than what the warrant allows. Without that clarification, officers could later argue that you voluntarily allowed them to search areas that were not included in the warrant. By stating that you do not consent beyond what the warrant authorizes, you make it clear that your compliance is limited strictly to the legal requirements of the document. Once officers are inside your home under a warrant, documentation becomes extremely valuable. If possible, recording the interaction can help preserve an accurate record of what happens during the search. Modern smartphones make this easier than ever. If your phone is already in your hand, you can begin recording immediately. If it isn't, voice commands can sometimes activate recording without reaching into your pockets or making sudden movements. However, safety always comes first. If officers appear agitated or if reaching for your phone might be misinterpreted as a threatening action, it's better to remain calm and avoid doing anything that could escalate tension. The reason recording is so powerful is simple. It creates an objective record. Memories can fade, stories can change, and details can become disputed later on. Video and audio evidence, however, capture events as they actually occurred. Whenever possible, documenting interactions with law enforcement protects everyone involved and provides clarity if questions arise later. There's also one final detail that many families overlook until it becomes a problem. If you have children in the home, it's important to teach them basic door safety. Kids are naturally curious and often eager to answer the door when someone knocks. Without guidance, they may open it immediately without checking who is outside. A simple conversation with your children about not opening the door for strangers or even for authority figures can prevent unexpected situations from developing. Teaching them to notify an adult first is a small step that can make a big difference. By preparing everyone in the household, you ensure that these principles are followed consistently, even when you're not the one closest to the door. When you put all of this together, the strategy is surprisingly straightforward. First, always identify who is outside before opening the door. Never respond blindly to a knock. Second, if you do choose to answer, open the door only slightly and keep a physical barrier in place whenever possible. Third, rely on calm words instead of physical force if the situation becomes tense. Fourth, if a warrant is mentioned, ask to see it and clearly state that you do not consent beyond its scope. And finally, document the interaction whenever it is safe to do so. These simple actions can transform a stressful encounter into a controlled and legally protected situation. Most people assume that interactions with police only happen during traffic stops or emergencies, but sometimes it begins with something as simple as a knock on the door. When that moment comes, the way you respond can determine whether the situation remains calm and routine or spirals into something much more serious. Knowing your rights is important, but knowing how to exercise them calmly and intelligently is even more powerful. Because in situations like these, the goal is not to argue, escalate, or create conflict. The goal is to stay safe, stay respectful, and protect your legal rights at the same time. If you found this information helpful, make sure you stay informed about your rights and how to handle everyday legal situations with confidence. Understanding these simple strategies could one day save you from a stressful and costly mistake. And remember, the smartest move during any unexpected encounter is staying calm, thinking clearly, and letting knowledge, not emotion, guide your actions.